there was a communication skill that I really had to learn. I feel there was like a human element of the job of directing that I feel like I hadn't like really needed to develop. And so for Sacramento, I wanted to make sure I was, I was more ready in that sense.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Michael Angarano is an actor. He sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
So before we hit record, you were saying that you don't really have a process. But I respond to you, right? And that means that you are hitting something that's effective. And so explain to me how you do that. Is there a typical way you go about this? Even though you don't have a process, is there a typical way in that you always have to these new people that you have to play?
There probably is. And there probably is like an unconscious process, or at least process of elimination, so to speak. But
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'll just talk about it in like a practical way, because I think that then I'll even start to like connect my own dots. But like, for instance, I love nothing more than having like a process of ways to get in, like, and that really does help me. And I've often said on jobs where I haven't maybe applied like the same approach that I did on something that was like full of preparation, like, oh, I wish I had something like that to kind of latch onto. And I'll go like, am I not being creative enough, or is it just the lack of approach? Is it a lack of like a systemic approach within me? But for instance, like if I'm playing a part that is based on a real person, or if it's a person who, needs to sound like they're from the South or somewhere, or a person who has a job that I know nothing about, like naturally that your kind of work is cut out for you. Your work is cut out in the sense of, I'm gonna work with a dialect coach. I'm gonna like study the words probably 100 times more than I would if I wasn't doing an accent. So I'm gonna sound. That's kind of inherent in that. I'm also gonna, physically want to feel like this person more. So I might do something to the way I'm, I don't know, like I might want to just change my body in a certain way, or have a more physical approach to the whole thing. And then, and so on and so forth. You kind of just go down the list. But then there's a part that's like, hey, this is a 37-year-old guy from New York, lives in California. Like, we want you to play this part. Yeah. I'm like, well, okay. And then like, just throw me in, throw me in there. I think I got it. I don't want to overdo it.
Yeah.
So, it does vary, but I never went to an acting class, and I never studied acting in a formal way. So, I was just like a working actor from the time I was like 5 years old. Yeah. And so it wasn't ever like a one-size-fits-all approach to the thing. And sometimes, and whatever that was about it, that it helped me, because I just never thought about it in one way. And sometimes that's a struggle, and other times I feel like it serves the right purpose too. Like I don't, sometimes I think that if I'm working with another actor who's like really prepared and really studied and really like has something in mind that they want to apply, sometimes that could be too much. Sometimes you're like, yeah, but then you're making it all about you. Yeah. And like the one acting class I did do, what I was telling you about, I found it so interesting. I was like 30-something years old, and I just wanted to like revamp and kind of like, restore, like I was saying. And I was a little put off by like the things they were like, telling these people to do. The coach was telling these people to do, to like, be in the moment or be present. I'm like, if I saw an actor doing that, there would be on a set, there would be nothing more distracting to me. Yes. And nothing more bizarre. And it's sort of like it's not I understand the skill, and I understand, like, yeah, maybe this is something that you do on a Saturday morning. Alone, very much alone, in a cabin in the woods somewhere. But if you're doing this on a film set, when, you know, the ADs, and it's not the right skill, like it's not the right skill to have.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
and to your point, are you also saying that it's actually excessive in a way that's actually not very beneficial to the moment ultimately, because it's so about them? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Ultimately, I feel like it's also putting too much pressure. You're putting too much pressure on being relaxed. You're putting too much pressure on your vocal warm up. Do it if you need it. If you're playing a house where you're doing it 8 times a week, whatever it is, it's like, do it if you need it. But if we're in a room up here, you know, in a church, in a little conference room, it's like,
and you're hitting on something, because the few times I've actually done a little acting work when people wanted to do that kind of thing as relaxation, it always stressed me out more.
There's something really
to do that. Now maybe I need to like fully go into it. Like, maybe I'm not giving it enough of a chance. But I'm just saying, I'm one of those actors that would actually be stressed out. By an excessive relaxation approach.
Yeah. I think it's just like, look, it certainly serves a purpose. And I feel like nothing should feel prescriptive. And I think that's where I've always struggled.
Yes.
And also like bumped. Yeah. Where it's not a one size fits all thing. You don't need to, I'm thinking of something in my head, like, like I said, like acting for a long time, but at one point I kind of decided to like experiment in my own way, because I would be on these television shows, and you know, they put you in wardrobe that like is 3 sizes too big on you.
Yeah.
Nothing feels normal. Like, they cut your hair right before you go on, so your hair is like a mullet or something. Like, they make you feel, it feels so uncomfortable. You feel so out of yourself sometimes. And I at one point stopped trying to like fight that, and I was like, okay, whatever you're gonna give me, I'm gonna try and make work. I'm gonna try and fit myself into whatever mold you are putting me in. And
did that unlock something?
For better or for worse. It's no, truly, like, sometimes when I watch an actor who is, who really knows what they need and really knows who they are, I'm like really fascinated by that. I'm like, oh, like you're really like taking agency over like what you need and what doesn't feel right for you. Whereas like if somebody gave me like a pair of glasses to wear, and in the 5 seconds that it takes for me to ultimately accept these glasses that they're asking me to wear, I would be like, oh, I would never wear these. The frames are too big. It's like, it's weird. It's like crooked. It's going to make me look weird on my face. It's going to feel fake. Okay, I'll try it. Thank you. It's all like an internal monologue, but like, and other actors who are, some people would never do that.
Right.
Maybe it's just me being afraid of conflict, but ultimately, I just find that interesting sometimes. I just find it interesting that I think in terms of like approach to things, I've sort of made a point of my own way of feeling like I'm just going to try and fit in. I'm just going to try and fit in and serve this in whatever way it is. And that's why it's not a one size fits all, because if I did the same thing for this that I did for that, it would feel, it would be distracting. It would be distracting to a regular viewer.
Right.
Right.
I'm just fascinated by actors that I like as adults that were doing this since they were little kids. Because usually I always think, well, there has to be some bad habits that were developed as children that they had to figure out how to deal with as adults, as adult actors. And, and then so I'm always asking, or I have been asking, like, what did you do with those habits? But lately, like, a lot of these people who are great adult actors that were child actors are like, no, I didn't really have any bad habits. I find that fascinating. What about you? Do you relate to that?
Look, I don't think there is any way for anybody not to have a habit.
Yeah.
Like, everybody does, whether you're aware of them or not. And you can also develop new ones. You can have ones that you can have emotional habits that start at from inception, from reading a thing, from hearing about a script from your age. Like, you could. It doesn't have to be a physical tic.
Yeah.
You could also have a physical tic. Like, just recently, I was on a job, and I was blown away because I was like, I had just directed something. I had basically watched myself for 10 months straight, which, like I had really, I wasn't aware of this thing that he said I was doing. And I was on a set, and it was the boom operator who came up to me. He was like, you're tapping your foot.
Whoa.
As you're speaking. And he was like, I'm not sure if it's like a rhythmic thing. Oh, wow. And then once I became aware of my foot, I realized I was like beating out the rhythm of as I was saying it, and I was like, that's fucked up. That's like really intense. That I was doing this total actor tell.
Yeah.
That it was probably like a medium shot. My foot probably wasn't even in the shot, and from the waist down, I'm just like beating something out. And to the point to go against what we were saying before, like a nice relaxation technique from the waist down might help that,
Exactly.
But no, it was just something that I think these things manifest in weird ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's nice to be aware of those things. Sometimes it's nice to not be aware of those things and just fully lean in. But some of the best actors, all actors have these tics and blocks, and it's just the creative ways around them and into them that I feel is fascinating.
Yes. Yes.
Emotional blocks exist just as much as physical ones, and then mental ones, and
That's right.
I went through a phase of having like almost stage fright, which was funny because I haven't been on stage, but I remember it. It just came on suddenly. And
isn't that interesting? Like, so you did a lot of work before this. You were fine, and suddenly,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was something in a personal life. I was doing this show called The Nick, and I had like it was about a hospital in the turn of the century. So I had this like Van Dyke beard with like waxed mustache ends, and I was living in Williamsburg at the time and 100% fit in. But I went to a friend's wedding in between shoot days. My friend asked me to speak at his wedding, and these are my high school friends I was in front of, and so they're used to seeing me with like whatever I'm taking on for the part, like red hair, long hair, this crazy beard, but for whatever reason. Right before I went, I had to speak at his wedding, and I was like waiting backstage of this church backstage, and I got really nervous suddenly, and like really nervous, and as I got on stage, I was so aware. Of them like laughing at me. It was totally like from a nightmare, dream of being up in front of your friends naked or your classmates and stuff. And I like barely made it.
Wow.
I almost passed out. Like my heart was pounding. I had to go close to the mic because I felt like I couldn't breathe. Wow. I was just like really trying to, like, my vision started vibrating. Like I just had to get out of there.
Yeah.
And I made it. And then that was a Saturday. On Monday, I had a big scene in a courtroom.
And it was still reverberating through you.
It was a big scene at a courtroom where I had like 3 to 4 pages of just like back and forth with a lawyer, and I was on the stand. And this is how good certain directors are at I knew Soderbergh well, and he knew me well. And we started the scene, and I couldn't get through the first line.
Wow.
I couldn't get it out of my mouth.
Wow.
And he looked at me from behind the camera, almost like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
And I must have looked at him like, "I'm not okay."
Yeah.
And we were in the middle of a polar vortex in New York in a courtroom. It was cold. And he just looked at the camera. He goes, "We overheated. We need 5."
Yeah.
And that was how I got through that day. But that was something that I had to really work on and get through, and eventually started going to therapy for, because I was just like, why did this suddenly happen?
Why did that overcome you? Yeah.
Why, what was it? And it didn't take much to really understand that, I mean, I got up on stage as myself, as Michael, and felt really uncomfortable. It was kind of no character to play, so to speak. So it didn't take a lot of therapy to understand what was happening.
Yeah. But it's interesting though that when you got back to your work, though, it was still there, and it showed you how powerful that can be, or how it's in the same neighborhood, right? The speaking in front of your friends and speaking in your work is very different, but it's in the same area, maybe in your body.
What I sort of learned is it hadn't been in the same neighborhood for me. It was compartmentalized, and then I was like, it should be closer.
Oh, interesting.
It should be closer. It doesn't, not to say I should be, I don't need to get up on a stage or on a film set in front of hundreds of people as Michael and talk as myself, but I want to direct things, and I want to communicate with people, and I need to trust that.
Yeah.
And I think recently what's been so interesting is I'm doing press for Sacramento. It was a movie I wrote for 10 years and acted in and directed also. And I even found myself being how do I want to be?
Yeah.
How do I want to present myself to people?
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's one and the same. It should feel the same, but I think it's the difference of as an actor, I'm just so used to hiding.
Yeah.
And then
you've been doing it so long.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. Were you always wanting to write and direct when you were very, very young and doing this?
Yeah, I would say young enough. I mean, I would say probably young enough to if I never acted before.
Yeah.
That the urge to write and direct also came about at the appropriate age. Mm-hmm. It's only that I started acting at age 5. Mm-hmm. So that's insanely young.
Yeah.
But I feel around age 15, 14, 15, even younger than that, I started writing. And I was always writing screenplays. I was always writing script form. Mm-hmm. I never wrote short stories or poetry. It was always interior diner.
You were probably able to give screenwriters form notes as a young kid.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was also being on, I'm sure it was also, the influence of being on so many film sets. But I remember the moment where I was on a film and I was working with a director who had also written the script, and it was a first-time director, and just remember watching him really struggle in terms of blocking scenes, working with actors, and just bringing his thing to life.
Yeah.
And filming his thing. It didn't translate. He was such a beautiful writer, and then
that's so scary.
And I just was man, I just, you're not sabotaging yourself, like I wouldn't be that cruel, but it was sort of like, you're hurting this. You're hurting this. You're not moving.
Yeah.
You're not fucking moving.
Yeah.
We ended up like having to come back 7 months later and not only do reshoots, but like actually shoot scenes that we didn't shoot because we didn't get to. Wow. So it's...
What a learning experience for you, right?
And I just remember thinking, I mean, very basically, I just remember being like, well, I mean, I think I can do this. I think I can like serve this material better in a more like practical, functional way, you know?
Right. When you did write, were you always writing something for yourself as an actor?
Yes, it did start as like me writing opportunities for myself as an actor, where I'm like, ooh, I want to make a movie like The Last Detail, you know, like, or just, I think it was also the approach of, because writing a screenplay for me was almost like writing a journal. Like if I go to a coffee shop, I could probably like free form write 30 pages of a screenplay based on like a mixture of the conversations I had in the last 20 weeks, like, you know, month, and never revisit it again. And then I'll look back on it, you know, 10 years from now, and I'll think like, I'll see like, oh, that's actually a glimpse into like a journal entry, you know? And so I think it functions like that for me, like as a form of expression. And now it's different. Now, like I like writing in a more formal sort of way, in which I'm not like, you know, casting myself as a part in it. I think because I'm an actor and because it does sort of marry itself to how I talk and ultimately how I see myself, not how I see myself, but like how like sometimes I cast myself, which is a narcissistic trait. But
you also know your strengths, your ultimate strengths, I guess, right? Or you think you do.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and also like, especially with the experience of Sacramento, which was, I wouldn't say eye-opening, but there were moments where I was like, it was the first time I realized like, oh, this is not something I'll always need to do. I won't always need to write a part for myself. I won't always need to direct the thing I also act in. I won't also always have to direct the thing I write, because it was the first time I think I really like enjoyed serving as a director separately and as a writer separatly. And, you know, it doesn't have to be this like holy trinity for me anymore. Yeah. For a while I was like, well, I can, so why not, almost, you know, like I can do these things, so why not? But I feel like letting go of that is gonna help in a certain way, you know?
I think that's true.
I was like, I said this, I was having a conversation. I'm friends with Soderbergh now, and I remember talking to him about it. And in his sort of like silent way, I felt like he was insinuating that to me. Because at one point he was his own writer, and then at one point he stopped writing and he only was directing. And I was like, right, like you can't probably direct Oppenheimer and be Oppenheimer.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Right. Like, I was talking to him about directing, and I was like, they are directly opposing entities. Directing and acting. They are in direct opposition of each other.
Yes.
And so that like point of tension is a really beautiful one.
Right.
And I love both sides of it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, like I don't think that point of tension has to be two different people always. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But I think it's also, I think it's that way for a reason.
Right.
Too.
Right. And I think that it has to be growth. That's growth. I think because ultimately I believe that this is the special thing about this art is that it's collaborative. We're going to realize that sooner or later, meaning us as people in this, meaning it may be on our deathbed that we realize it, and we're like, oh man, that would have been so much better if I let that artist in a little bit and collaborated, because I somehow I really believe in a mystical way that it's the best that we can get out of this is in collaboration.
Yeah.
But for so long, I put up on a pedestal the auteur, actor, director, writer, like you're saying.
Yeah.
You put it on a pedestal. It's like that. Well, that's the ultimate expression of like art, you know, in this.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that anymore.
I know, and it is interesting because I feel like that auteur idea is probably more like there's probably more of them than ever.
Right.
Because of where we are just as a society, culture, and also just like technology. I feel like a lot more people will probably do that. And look, also, Soderbergh's also his own cameraman, his own editor, his own. He does his own cinematographer. Yeah. So there is something to optimization, and I think that is a little bit of baked into what the idea of acting into something you write and then directing, and it's like a streamlined sort of like flow of creativity from top down, and also like collaboration is a beautiful, like it would be an insane thing if I also edited it and sound mixed it.
Did the catering
like there is something to time management.
And that's why Soderbergh does all that, right? I mean, it's mainly about time. I mean, and if he had people that were able to be as smooth as he was in terms of those jobs, he probably would use them. But it's just that it's better with him.
Yeah, he's worked with other DPs, and I think he just got to a point where he, the communication
exactly
was not wasting time, but he could do it faster if he did it and he understood it.
And that makes sense, yeah.
I've
realized that some of my favorite movies are men friendship movies. Bottle Rocket. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite movies is Saint Jack with Ben Gazzara.
Oh, I've never seen.
Oh, yeah, you got to see that.
Ooh.
And I like a couple other ones that are just like, wow. And then I even made something about men friendship, right? And I'm thinking, what is that in me? Like, what is that? Why is that so important, or it places things in a favorite category? Sacramento has all of the things I'm picky about in these kind of movies. And and I was so happy to see that, because I saw it at a press screening. I was like, expectations were low. No offense. I'm just like, let's.
Please.
I mean, I love Cera. I mean, I love everybody in this, but I'm just like, comedy now is so. I'm so disappointed.
Yeah.
All the time. Mm-hmm. So I love what this did to me. Like, I love when I go in low, and I really love something like this. And I really did, man. And I commend it. And one of the things that just hearing some things about it is Chris Smith, your co-writer, said that you said at one point, I'm going to do this until it's not fun. And when it's not fun, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And this is the 10-year journey of getting this made. And Chris said it was never not fun.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I mean,
no. I was just going to say that it's not entirely, like, it definitely wasn't fun several times.
But it was probably once you were in production, right?
The writing of it was always really fun.
Yeah.
Writing of it was really fun.
And I think, and I just need to interrupt for a second. I think that is hugely important to what happened to me sitting there in the movie theater, okay? Because the problem I have is when things become committee made, or they get made, especially comedy, or they get made, or they make decisions based on what they think people like instead of what you guys, I think, did, which is pleasing yourselves. But continue. I needed to say that.
No, I totally agree. I mean, there was one moment where we thought Sacramento could also be a $25 million studio movie, or we could write it on spec, and we initially started writing it for Chris and I to maybe we'll make this for like $250,000 and just hire the 4-man crew and drive to Sacramento and improvise the whole thing. And then we started writing it, and we thought, like, actually when we write together, it's decent. It's decent enough that we should write a script. And so that version never came to fruition. And then like when we were really trying to get it made, and Mike came on board, that nudged it. But the writing of it was always fun. Like Chris and I in a room was always fun. And looking for financing was not fun. Because people, then you're in a room with somebody and they're talking about, like, your experience of having fun writing with your friend in a way that's not fun.
Yeah.
They're just trying to make money and trying to make something that ultimately, like, to every person who ever, sat down in a room trying to pitch something, it's like, immediately, it's like, this is not fun. Nothing's fun about that. Also, like, the making of it was incredibly fun. More fun than I thought it was going to be. And if I had, like, anything about any true, like, existential dread or fear walking into it, it was about the experience. Because going back to that experience I had when I was 15 on a film set, where I saw that director really struggle.
Yeah.
I sort of promised myself that if I ever make something, I won't be like that. And, like, the number one thing I feel like as a director, and you were saying this too, but, like, the number one thing is to not let your actors see that you're stressed. Just because I've been the actor who sees a director stressed, and everything sort of falls apart.
Yeah.
And you're sort of like a parent in that sense. You're sort of like, you gotta parent.
Yep.
You gotta parent, and you gotta show them that it's okay, even if it's falling apart, because it's gonna fall apart.
Yep.
It's all a mess.
Yep.
Nobody knows.
Yep.
It's all a fucking mess, and you don't know what you're doing. Like, face value, that is, like, the common denominator of all these things. And so
it's much easier, though, to deal with the mess when the leader is not, falling apart.
Yeah.
Then everybody can step up into it, even if it's a mess.
And it's not to say, like, you can't get emotional.
Right.
I feel like that's different than letting your stress bleed into these things.
Yeah.
So I had directed another film called Avenues when I was, like 10 years ago. And then that was a really tough shoot. And it wasn't that it wasn't fun, but that wouldn't be the first word I would choose to describe it. It was hard. It was like in the middle of winter in New York on a really small budget, like actors getting dressed in like Dunkin' Donuts and it was fun. It was fun. It was also really, really hard. And I love that movie, and I'm very proud of it. But the walking into this one, I was like, I want to take care of actors and crew better.
And so you knew what you needed. You knew what you needed, and you weren't going to settle for something, right?
Yes.
That's part of the trouble, I guess, you were having with financing, because you knew you could do it in a certain number like you did.
Yeah.
But you didn't want to, I guess.
Well, it was also like a me problem. Like, what can I do? Like, I remember in Avenues, I would walk onto a set, or the actors would walk onto set to shoot a scene, and we would be about to shoot, and they would look at me like, what am I doing? And I was like, oh, right, I'm the director. This is my job now. I need to talk about this.
Yeah.
And so just in that sense, I had to learn, like, also full circle to the not being able to speak properly on the set of The Knick. Like, there was a communication skill that I really had to learn. I feel there was like a human element of the job of directing that I feel like I hadn't like really needed to develop.
Interesting.
And so for Sacramento, I wanted to make sure I was, I was more ready in that sense.
But didn't you just know what worked for you from directors and just applied that? Or am I simplifying it too much? You know what I mean? Like what made you not know how to talk like that?
Well, directing actors is not my forte either. It's not a strong suit for me. I think actually with the amount of directors that I've worked with, the number of directors who know how to talk to actors is like less than 5%. It's remarkable.
It's remarkable
when they can.
Oh,
And
yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, it's remarkable how many can't.
Yeah.
But it's amazing when somebody can.
Yeah.
Because it's a skill. It's a skill, and it's a talent.
Yeah.
And it usually, but not always, goes hand in hand with them also being a good director in other senses. Like sometimes a director is a great actor's director, and then you see something and you're like, oh, okay, like that really worked for me, but it's not working for everybody else. But I'll always work with that director again because I love them and I love what they brought out of me and what they made me feel. And vice versa. Sometimes a great director is not a great actor's director, and it's maybe the same feeling. But for a director to be a great director and also be a great actor's director, that's incredibly rare. Love Soderbergh to death, not an actor's director. Ultimately is an actor's director in the very holistic sense, because he just doesn't really communicate with you. He'll let you do whatever you want to do, which once you realize that's total liberation and freedom.
Yeah.
And that what you need to do to adjust is do what you wanted to do on take 5 or 6 in rehearsal or take 1. Just do what you want. Do what you want to do. Cut the bullshit.
Yeah.
Cut the
But it may take some time to understand that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yes.
Because it's not the usual norm.
No, you have to get through the, oh, he hates me fear.
Right. Right.
Right. Like, oh, he only needs 1 take because I suck, and he realizes that I can't do it. So he's not going to waste any more time on set.
Right.
He's going to move on as quick as possible.
Right. And so wait, so when you yourself realized that this is not a strong suit for you, what did you do to kind of learn that language that you were saying that you needed to find?
Well, again, the adjustment is realizing oh, not every actor is like me. I think I was bad at it, and probably am bad at it, because I'm ultimately I'm an actor, so I know what I need and what I don't need.
Yeah.
But nobody's the same as me.
Right.
No, an actor like Michael Cera might be totally different than me in what he needs or doesn't need. Everybody's totally different. Nobody has the same thing for breakfast every morning.
Right. Right.
So everybody's set of needs it varies, and knowing that just in general is good is like step 1.
Step 1. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then on my first thing, a friend of mine, I'll mention his name just because I think he's such a great actor. His name is Greg Vratzos, and he's been in a ton of stuff, and we've worked together a bunch of times. And he played, he's also a writer and he's a director too. But he played a part in Avenues where he needs to get handcuffed. Greg came up to me before we were shooting, we had just blocked a scene. And he came up to me in the handcuffs. He was like, Mike, I want to leave the handcuffs on. And I looked at him. I was like, why? What are you talking about? He was like, I just want to know the feeling. I'm like, I don't care what the fuck you do, man. And I was like, I realized, I'm like, oh, I'm that kind of director.
Yeah.
what an asshole. Like, wow, like what I like judged him. But also I was like, all right, yeah, do whatever you need. And you know, that is a type of director that I worked with where I was like, oh, I wouldn't think that I would fall into that category.
Right.
I would think I would be like, yeah. Do you want to go? You want to go in the bathroom and make it a cell? We'll pad it off. You know, like I didn't go with him. I didn't like flow with him on it at all. I was like, stop, man. Like, go get a coffee. Go relax. Go to Dunkin' Donuts. You know.
Yeah, that's funny.
So yeah, that really helped with Sacramento in terms of that was just. But still, I don't think I'm nearly as adept as like the great directors that I've worked with in that like succinct.
Yeah.
Like acute direction
to
an actor that has the potential to make you feel seen and also like unlock something.
Yes.
You know?
And I think though that just knowing that you don't have that skill puts you so far above so many directors that don't know that they don't have it.
Right. Right.
And that's dangerous, actually.
Yeah.
That's actually dangerous, and they can potentially have real serious drawbacks in their work because they don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, there's also nothing worse than somebody who thinks they do when they don't.
Exactly.
Like somebody who actually does the opposite of getting into your head.
Yeah.
Of like over directing you.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
I mean, who's that? You know, rest in peace, Gene Hackman. It's like, you know, faster, slower, louder, softer. That's all you need to tell me. You know?
Yeah.
And
yeah, because he directed himself.
Exactly.
You know, and
some actors do that.
Yes.
You don't need to tell a Gene Hackman or really like a Michael Cera. You don't need to tell them something they don't need to know. Mm-hmm. You know, it's faster, slower, louder, softer.
Was Michael a friend, or did you guys work together and you knew what he was all about?
We were friends since we were like 20 years old.
Oh, okay.
And then he composed Avenues, actually. So I worked with him in that sense. And so for Sacramento, I knew what
You knew he was going to deliver it, right?
Yeah, and also like he still day one was doing something I totally didn't anticipate in that part. Like he made certain choices for that part that we had never anticipated. That I think, in my opinion, was like so much smarter. Mm-hmm. Is like he made so many clever choices.
Yeah.
Along the way.
I think he's one of the few comedy actors that doesn't settle on what works. Mm-hmm. Right? He tries something else and it works.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's a progressive kind of comedy instead
Right.
of just like doing what everybody knows that would work. Like even in the CeraVe commercial.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like slightly ahead of comedy.
Yeah.
And that's why it's funny. And he's doing that in Sacramento too.
Yeah.
Because it could be kind of a cliche, kind of like
Totally.
nervous dad thing.
Yeah.
That we know is funny, but he doesn't do that. You were smart enough to be like, all right, even though you've been with this for 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
You were smart enough to be like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Keep going.
100%. It was, and we had a really good day one in terms of like the right kind of scene to settle into on a day one. Like sometimes you're doing like way too important of a scene, and you still have to like. I think most actors and directors, and basically everybody who's ever worked on a crew knows that like day one has the potential to be like a full throwaway of a day.
Yeah.
And it's so often you're doing such like important stuff, but we were doing like, and in our case it was like a 90% throwaway day because we were doing a 6-page long scene that in the movie is like 45 seconds long. And it was a writing thing. We realized like so much of this scene was unnecessary. But fortunately for me and Mike, we were able to like sit down across from each other at a table is when we go to lunch in the movie. It's like before we go to Sacramento. That's like a major 6-page scene in the script. And in the movie, I kept looking at it. I was like, this is way too long. Like, it's really dragging because we're not learning anything. And so I feel like it was a perfect sample size of like Mike being able to try something and us kind of like calibrating around what we were gonna be doing.
And you did that on set, on like kind of honed it there.
It was more just like the first opportunity to really see what this dynamic was going to be like.
Yeah.
And how like what he was doing with Glenn, that were different choices immediately that we had anticipated.
Yeah.
And in a really fun way,
Yeah.
In the way you're describing.
Yeah.
In the way you're describing that, I was like, oh, this is not the typical thing that you would expect.
Right. I want this movie to succeed, Sacramento, but it succeeded with me, and that's all that matters. You've done your job.
Thanks, man.
Okay, I do want it to succeed though, because I think it would be good for everything if a comedy like this does well, and it will be good for filmmakers that want to make stuff like this, which I want to see more stuff like this. But your job is over. Okay, you did a good job.
Thanks,
I stamp it. That's all that matters. It's my opinion is all that matters, is what I'm saying. And I said that you didn't know if it was successful or not.
Yeah.
And now I'm saying it is. So this should make you very happy.
It does.
But we do need people to see this because it's worthy to be seen.
Thanks, man.
Okay, and I mean that. Michael Angarano, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.